Thank you very much. I didn't actually know I was the keynote speaker until after my talk had been accepted, to be completely honest. I just submitted this talk normally as one does. But, so yes, I'm Don Goodman. I'm the head of marketing at Formance, and I have recently moved from developer relations into marketing, and I want to share some of the observations that I've made in that transition, right? Whenever there's change, you begin to see things in a different light and begin to understand things in different ways. And after drinking the Kool-Aid for a long time, I've decided developers are not special snowflakes, and I want to talk about that for 40 minutes. So I want to challenge DevRel orthodoxy because we have a lot of assumptions in developer relations, and I think it's worth going through and looking at them. So as I said, I've moved from DevRel to marketing, right? And this is something that always gives you a new experience when you change jobs. I did spend over a decade in DevRel. I got my start at Slack. I've worked for some small companies you've never heard of, GitHub, my own consultancy for a while. So I've been doing this for quite some time. But with my new job, I got thrown into the deep end of B2B marketing, right? I was hired as a marketer. I don't know why. Clem, thank you for investing in me. But I've had to learn a lot from the ground up in the course of doing this. And it's given me a new perspective, right? Primarily that DevRel is weird, y'all. I'm not even, I see people taking photos. I'll sit on that one. It is a stranger beast than I realized while I was swimming in the waters. But also I've learned that B2B marketing is kind of lost. There's a lot going on there that, as a former DevRel practitioner, I find deeply mysterious. And so I think we might be moving into a new era of marketing, and I want to talk about that. And that's going to be the conclusion of my talk, is what that looks like and why I think that we're making this move. But the thing I really want to talk about here, that image is much more subtle than I expected it to be, is that DevRel has built an ivory tower. DevRel exists in a bubble. It has isolated itself from other things that maybe it should not have isolated itself from. And it's very difficult to see when you're living in the ivory tower that you are in an ivory tower, right? For those of you who aren't familiar with that expression, that's usually applied to like universities, where researchers are doing work that's not really connected to the real world. But in this case, I think it applies here as well. So, as we all know, DevRel is not marketing. We've been told this repeatedly over and over again, right? And it isn't product, and it isn't just community. It does involve community, but it isn't just community. It's not tech support, and it's definitely not sales, right? Except that DevRel is all of these things except maybe sales, right? A little mixture of all of them, sort of, right? But it's also none of these things, because we don't know where to situate DevRel in our organization charts. Do we fall under marketing? Do we fall under product? Do we report to the CTO? Who knows? Everybody has a different opinion about this because it's all kind of confused. We've been stuck in an identity crisis since forever. We've been having conferences for years trying to decide what even is DevRel, right? And this hasn't been resolved yet. And it's no wonder that DevRel has been stuck in a professionalization crisis since forever. What are the criteria for doing DevRel well? What are the criteria for moving up in your job? What even does the career ladder look like? No one knows. We don't know. So what even is DevRel? I'm not going to answer this question in this talk, but it's a question we've been asking as DevRel practitioners a lot. And now that I've gotten out of DevRel, I'm asking it even more, actually. I mean, and we spend so much of our time justifying this, right? We have this great book, The Business Value of Developer Relations, which is not really for DevRel people, but for DevRel people to talk to their boss and explain why DevRel is valuable, right? The fact that we have to have books like this is weird. But on top of all of that, I'm also a trained philosopher. I have a doctorate in philosophy. I studied scientific method in mid-20th century neurophysiology. That particular part's not important because philosophy ultimately is uncovering hidden assumptions. I think this is a life skill that we should all have. But I've been trained specifically in this, and it's questioning those assumptions once we uncover them, discarding those assumptions that we realize are not worth keeping, and keeping those that we identify that do have value, and then rebuilding our intellectual foundation on top of those assumptions, having looked at them thoughtfully and reflected on them thoughtfully. So I want to go assumption hunting in this talk, right? I want to see the assumptions underlying DevRel, and I want us to be heretics. I want us to be open to questioning those assumptions, because I think heresy can lead to hope, and I am full of hope, actually. This may be my first talk in which I am full of hope. Those of you who've seen my previous talks know that they go to dark places pretty quickly, but this one is not going to do that. So, all that said, let's dive in. Part 1. Developers are not special snowflakes. This is also my cue to hydrate. You can just cut this out in post, right? So, DevRel dogma, developers are special snowflakes. DevRel exists because developers are different, right? The New Kingmakers was a big book. It was a book that was big in developing this way of thinking about developer relations, right? That developers were making buying decisions, that developers reacted differently to marketing tactics, that marketers reacted differently to sales, and that ultimately we needed a new tack to take on the New Kingmakers, right? And then there's also this really excellent book, Developer Marketing Does Not Exist. It's full of great advice on how we should proceed as a profession. But the whole opening chapter is developing this theme that what we do in DevRel is not marketing, precisely because developers are different and respond differently to marketing tactics. So developers make purchasing decisions. They make business decisions. Developers, and this is continuing with the dogma, are allergic to marketing. Developers hate being sold to. The moment they think they're being sold to instead of talked to, they walk away, right? Developers are good bullshit detectors, right? Developers require, therefore, authenticity. They're not going to put up with your bullshit. And here's a quote. I'm not going to attribute it, although if you want to know who it's from, I'm happy to tell you, just because I don't know the author. I don't want to say anything bad about the author, but I think this quote is interesting. DevRel is not marketing. Sure, it can work with marketing, but reducing it to a lead generation tool is like asking a Michelin-starred chef to sling burgers at a drive-thru. Companies that treat DevRel as a shortcut to sales are setting themselves up for failure, and numbers will show that at some point. Y'all, this is arrogant. This is really deeply arrogant. It's based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what marketing even is. Yes, we do lead gen, but we do a lot more than lead gen, right? And comparing DevRel to Michelin-starred chef is really like begging the question. So I'm just kind of in shock now, in retrospect. In the past, I'd have nodded and agreed with that. And I'm sure I've said very, very similar things myself, but from my new perspective, I really do find this quite shocking. So let's step outside the DevRel bubble for a moment, if we can. Lots of people make purchasing decisions, not just developers. Lots of people make business decisions, not just developers. Everyone is allergic to marketing, not just developers. And I've seen this firsthand. Everyone hates being sold to, not just developers. Everyone, most people, maybe not everyone, everyone's a bold claim. Most people are good bullshit detectors, really and truly. I mean, look at the number of people who are taking quizzes, seeing if they can identify if an image is AI generated or a photograph, right? People love taking these quizzes and discovering that they're actually quite good at identifying the AI, because everyone's a good bullshit detector. Everyone requires authenticity. not just developers. So if the premise is false, that developers are special snowflakes, how did DevRel end up where it is? And the hint is it's got nothing to do with developers. My theory is that traditional B2B marketing playbooks disrespect people, and that DevRel was just fast to notice this fact. We have a very short feedback loop. So traditional marketing does work. I mean, that's why these playbooks are still in play, right? But working with developers yields a tighter feedback loop, so we learn quickly what works better and what doesn't. And so I want to look at some of what DevRel has actually learned in this environment, because I think it's going to be broadly applicable. So that's my cue to slow down. Because I'm going through this quite fast and I'm talking quite fast. So DevRel gets a lot right. Don't get me wrong. So, for example, we know in DevRel that content is more than just tooting your own horn, right? This is a common B2B marketing playbook, that content is for SEO, not really meant for human consumption, right? It's meant for machines. So there's a lot of keyword cramming that happens in B2B content, and they need a lot of it. They need a lot of content. They need a lot of links. They need a lot of cross-linking. There's all these criteria that they believe you have to hit to successfully optimize your search engine results, right? And so they're generating content not for humans, but for machines. But when they do generate content for humans, the assumptions are just as bad, right? Because there's this usually an inherent focus on the company and the product, and not on the reader itself. There's a focus on new features as opposed to new solutions to existing challenges that haven't been addressed. There's a lot of company announcements. Hey, we just hired so-and-so, just started a new office, right? And we know as DevRel people, this is not something that speaks to an audience, right? We don't want to publish this stuff on our blogs because no one wants to read this. No one really cares. I understand that content writing should be a person who has a challenge to help. Is there something sounding? Should I move over here? Right? The content should focus on potential customers, their needs, their challenges, their stories, right? That it should focus on problem solving. That it should focus on sharing knowledge, empowering people, because good content lifts others up. Point being here, this is a good lesson for B2B marketing, right? The typical playbooks focused on SEO, I mean, fine. It's becoming increasingly irrelevant in the age of LLMs. But we know that what brings people to us, thank you, is helping them out with good content. Gated content is a fool's errand. This is another really common B2B marketing playbook, right? Where you actually create something intriguing for people to read, a white paper or some such, right? You put it on a dedicated landing page so that people can find it easily. You even advertise this content, right? You put ads on LinkedIn or Reddit or wherever. But then you demand that you give your name and email first before you give them access to the content. Then you send it to them via email or something like that. This is a terrible idea, right? But it's so common. I mean, just to give you a story from my own experience, I'm working with a content licensor to generate a white paper to hand out using exactly this sort of thing. Like, yeah, just throw this on a gated page and then, rake in the leads. And I reacted very badly to that. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give this very excellent content away for free. Because the people who do put in their email often don't put in like a work email or anything that's useful. The lead is worthless, essentially. But if I give it to them for free first, and then they come back to me, it's because they actually found it useful and interesting and want to engage with me. And that's an extremely warm lead indeed. Maybe I get fewer of them, right? But they're way better. And they were blown away by this concept. They're like, why would, really? Is that? No. My man, people do respond, right? But we understand that the interesting people won't respond to that. And potential strong leads walk away. So what should we do? Obviously give it away for free. Like I said, the cost of fewer leads, but stronger inbound interest. And if the content is any good, even if we aren't collecting leads, we've built brand equity, right? We have built brand reputation. We've done a lot of things positively. Because marketing is connecting to people, right? It's not just throwing stuff at them and hoping that they respond. It's not spamming them. It's actually making connections with people by having conversations about solutions to the challenges that they face specifically. And that's something that just really shocked me. The B2B marketing gets really wrong. Point 3, wasting time with cold outbound. Another common B2B marketing playbook, right, is you determine your ideal, I am so jet lagged, I can't remember what ICP stands for. Ideal customer persona, right? You use that to build an email list by harvesting them somehow, craft an email that vaguely connects with those ICPs, and then you spam them with cold emails, right? I receive these sorts of emails multiple times a day, and I wish my spam filter were better at catching them because I have to manually move them to spam. I hate it. I hate these cold emails. And yet people seem to think they work. And they do, to a certain extent. When you send a cold email like campaign like this, you can expect a certain click-through rate on these sorts of things, and people are going to respond to it, but it's going to be very small. And of course, as we know, there's a risk of having alienated people that might actually have been interested, but they got a cold email that turned them away, right? So, and then we send those clicks to sales as marketing qualified leads, right? And then sales looks back at you and goes, ugh, this is terrible. None of these are going to convert to sales qualified leads, right? Because this is a terrible playbook. Right? Because those leads aren't really any good. Not really. It's better to do things that bring people to you, right? By solving problems, writing good content to share with an audience, right? And then promote it, sure. Advertise your good content. But then you're going to start to see actual concrete interest. You're going to see people visiting your sites. You're going to see people reading your documentation. You're going to see people actually filling out the contact us forms. And they're very excited at that point. So they're either warm and you can reach out to them directly, right? Or they're reaching out to you. And in either case, there's clearly some interest. And those leads are going to be much, much better, right? Because again, marketing is connecting people. Or connecting to people, right? Not just, and connection isn't just sending cold emails. That's not a connection at all. That's pushing people away. Good marketing is drawing them in, right? By helping them. And then finally, I have to throw this in here. AA makes things worse, right? So common B2B marketing playbooks require, or so they think, lots of content. But writing content is tedious and time consuming, so you throw an LLM at it and you can generate like blog post after blog post in a single afternoon. It's incredible, the volume of stuff that you can write. Orders of magnitude, right? But marketing is in the habit of generating poor content already, right? Because they don't understand the process of connecting with an audience. Their prompts to the AI are not going to be very good. It's going to be very boring content. But it's going to be a lot more content. That's all that really matters here. But obviously, more isn't better. It actually makes this worse, right? Because AI sets off bullshit detectors, and as I mentioned, everyone is a bullshit detector. And so AI slop is going to erode brand trust. People are going to lose faith in your marketing and your brand and your company when they see that you're just generating page after page of AI slop. But this is what B2B marketing thinks is right? We can use this to generate more content, and more is better. But using AI like this is going to dehumanize your brand. And as I said, marketing is about connecting to people. So AI is making it harder to establish those connections of trust that you need. And again, good marketing also requires authenticity, and AI is anything but not authenticity. Good marketing also requires building trust, but you can't trust a machine, right? When you're generating AI content, you're not building bonds of trust with your audience. It's not generating a personal connection with your audience, right? Because again, marketing is connecting to people. We understand that in DevRel. So we're building up to something here. Oh, we've moved the T over here now. Thank you. So in DevRel, we're getting a lot of things right that are still being gotten wrong in B2B marketing. But DevRel has thrown the champagne out with the cork in rejecting marketing as one of their roles. So DevRel's gone, I love this, DevRel's gone too far. I have to have a Eurovision reference in all of my talks. One, sales is not the enemy. For the longest time, I thought sales was the enemy, right? Sales is tainted. You can't even talk to the sales team. You're not allowed to be in the same building as the sales team if possible, because they're going to rub off on you. And you're going to start selling to developers instead of working with them. I don't know where this came from. I'm really confused about it. I mean, developers don't want to be sold to, but like I said, nobody wants to be sold to. So why do we alone think that sales is tainted? Why does marketing why is marketing okay with cozying up to sales? Well, this is something that's not a bad idea, because that's not what a good sales team does. They don't sell to you. They don't pitch to you. I mean, bad sales teams do, right? They don't push you into a solution that's not right. A good sales discovery call sounds an awful lot like the kinds of conversations we have with customers. They want to understand the challenges that the customer faces. They want to understand what the customer is looking for, the kinds of solutions that are on the table, whether or not our product is a right fit for the problem that they're having, or maybe it isn't, and we can recommend something else, right? This should sound very familiar. I just sort of plowed through these, right? Sales wants to understand why they did or did not choose us. But they can teach us a lot about how to reach our audience because they have these conversations. They know the concerns on the minds of customers. They know the keywords that customers are looking for and using when thinking about things, which can be very good for writing content, right? They can teach us a lot. So go talk to your sales team. They have a lot of information that you can use that's going to be very surprising to you, I think, about how to reach out to people, the challenges that they actually face, and the kinds of solutions that they're looking for. Also, I think DevRel has stretched the concept of authenticity a little too thin. In part, there's a lot of pressure in DevRel to leverage our personal brand. This is not something that happens in marketing. In marketing, we want to be as anonymous as possible because it's not really about us, it's about the company. But often in DevRel, it's about you, the individual, right? And the result is awkward at best, right? There's a conflict of interest there. And at worst, right, sometimes it doesn't mix, right? So for those of you who know me, I left GitHub in no small part because it wasn't mixing the mixture of personal brand with the corporate identity. And I actually was no longer comfortable acting as a representative for GitHub. But nevertheless, being in DevRel, that's how I was being leveraged, right? Being in DevRel with a personal brand requires shilling and not shilling at the same time, right? technically, we are promoting a product as part of our job. But at the same time, we have to be authentic, which means we're not promoting a product. And it's very, very difficult to do these things at the same time. In fact, I dare say it's impossible. And so the result is just weird and contradictory in so many ways. And it's unnatural. And I don't know why we do this. I mean, what even is authenticity? And this is something that I've been struggling with personally over the last 10 years. And I want to say something about it. Authenticity is a relatively new Western concept about personality, that there is one true self that we should always strive to bring into the relationships and communications that we have. But for the Japanese in the room, you have a very different conception of this, right? Every interaction you have with a different person, you are a different person, right? You're a different person with your parents, with your employer, with your colleagues, with your friends, and that's okay, right? So this is a very Western-centric idea, and it's also, I just don't think it's true. I'm a different person on stage than I am with my friends, for example, right? Does that mean that I'm being inauthentic with you right now? No, not at all. This is just who I am on stage. But my friends know a very different Don, but also I'm not inauthentic with them either, right? So I think that the notion of authenticity, especially as we use it in developer relations, has become so vague as to be meaningless. Marketing doesn't really care about authenticity to the degree that we do, right? We also use authenticity as a metrics crutch, right? Oh, I can't measure what I'm doing, right? Because, you know, authentic communication is a qualitative je ne sais quoi, right? So please don't measure me. And we end up setting ourselves up for failure between the internal conflict of managing our personal brand with the brand that we're working for at the moment, right? And attempting to achieve an ideal of authenticity that is actually unattainable because it doesn't exist. We're really stretching ourselves thin, chasing something that doesn't actually ultimately, I think, matter in the end. Speaking of metrics, why are we still talking about metrics? I'm sure there's at least one metrics talk in this conference. It's something that it feels like we haven't really figured out, in part because what we do feels very qualitative, in part because what we do is a very long play, right? We don't see results until many years later in some cases, and it's difficult to attribute those results back to something that we're doing now. So for example, this conference presentation, none of you are going to go out and buy Formance as a result of that. But at some point 10 years in the future, one of you is going to go work for a fintech and think, oh, I remember that talk, right? I don't remember where I saw it, but I've seen it before, and I'll have no idea whether or not this talk impacted the bottom line. But we set ourselves apart from other departments, right? We're not marketing, we're not sales, we're not product, we're not whatever. And so we can't use the metrics that those departments use. We don't count MQLs. Why? We don't measure the CPL. Oh, goodness. I am blanking on the acronyms now. I knew this was going to happen. Cost per lead. We don't look at customer acquisition cost. Right? We don't look at average contract value. We do look at social media vanity metrics. We look at GitHub stars. We sometimes even look at marketing site metrics. How many people came to the website, right? We love to count the number of talks and events that we've been to. That's an easy one to count. And yeah, DevRel's a long game, but metrics have to convince our boss's boss, right? Our boss understands why we're here. Probably their boss, on the other hand, has to really understand, why are we spending this money? There has to be a reason for spending this money, and it can't be something 10 years in the future, and it can't be vanity metrics, right? Because I have to justify this and turn to the top brass, and a lot of what we measure just doesn't cut it, right? But marketing has lots of really good relevant metrics. They had to, right? They've been forced to develop these things. All of those 3-letter acronyms that I mentioned before, right, are generally marketing and sometimes sales metrics. And they're well understood. We don't have to convince our boss's boss that these metrics are the ones that we should be measured for, that when that number goes up and to the right, that's a good thing. And marketing has lots of good relevant attribution models, right? Because they don't like it when sales takes the credit. They need to be able to point out that they assisted in closing a sale at some point through their efforts, right? I don't think DevRel has any kind of attribution model that I'm aware of. But if we were to adopt these, that would mean admitting DevRel is marketing, right? If we're using marketing metrics, then we're marketing, right? So we can't do that unless we admit to ourselves that DevRel is actually marketing. Oh wait, I think DevRel is marketing. I think we should be using metrics like this. So, tea break. The moral of the story is this. I think that DevRel exists and has the attitude that it does about developers being special snowflakes and DevRel not being marketing. Is not that this attitude doesn't exist for the reason we think it does. It's not that developers are different. It's that B2B marketing is bad, and that as a culture, we're reacting to bad B2B marketing playbooks, not to the fact that developers needed to be treated differently. Because as I've tried to argue, developers are not special snowflakes, right? This is an arrogant premise on our part, and it's not doing us any work. It doesn't change anything about what we do to think that developers are special snowflakes. And that arrogance has led us to some really, I say interesting here, weird places. But it's also pushed away our friends in marketing and in sales. It's blinded us to the reality of the fact that what is the social structure in our organization that has led us to this place, right? And it's led us to a perpetual identity crisis where we don't know where we belong in an organization, we don't know who to report to, we don't know what metrics we should be using, we don't know what professionalization looks like, right? But what we're reacting to really, I think, is that bad marketing treats people as ends. Sorry, as means to an end. And good marketing treats people worthy of respect. DevRel has pioneered a new way of thinking about marketing that does focus on treating people with respect, which I think is fantastic. But we need to get over ourselves. We need to stop living in a bubble. We need to reach out to marketing. We need to reach out to sales, right? Let's take the best of DevRel and the best of B2B marketing, because there is some good stuff to be had there, and create something better than either of them. I think that we can expand what we do in DevRel beyond just developers to B2B marketing generally, and we can build a new kind of B2B marketing organization and a new set of B2B marketing playbooks built on the lessons that we've learned in DevRel. We should stop thinking so small and think much broader. All right, that's my talk. I'm out of time. This is my employer, Formance. We build open source financial infrastructure. If you're in fintech, I'm really interested in talking to you about it. Yeah, and